So always leave on a positive note if you can. And so I just say, look, not like all my microbiology friends, I think that widespread resistance is not inevitable. And I talk about why I think that. Part of what I'll show then following that is that slide that I just showed, that you can turn this around. And then as you move, if you move into an advocacy role, you want to have a call to action. So you wouldn't do this normally at a peer-to-peer scientific conference, but if you're speaking before a group of people and you want them to advocate for your issue, deciding on your CE, I want you to advocate on helping me shape my CE. That's a joke. Okay, so you want to have a call to action. So this is pretty text heavy. This is as text heavy as I ever get, and probably not ideal. I don't know why I'm using this as an example. What you can do, you can contact your representatives and tell them to support PAMTA. You can vote with your dollars. You can buy meat and poultry products labeled raised without antibiotics or no antibiotics administered. Some simple things that people can do. Or you can go to saveantibiotics.org, someplace where they can get more information. So this is as much text as I ever have on a slide. And then my last slide is prepare and practice. So that's what I have for you all.
Thank you.
Oh, and then always, you want to either curtsy or bow.
Well, I think we have a few minutes for questions or comments. Thank you so much. This was great. I learned a lot. Made me think about my own slide deck and presentation style. So
It makes me think about mine every time too. Thank you. Are you guys excited to do your talks?
Anybody?
We didn't have to do so much work before the talk.
That's how you have something to talk about.
I know.
When you're doing a presentation, do you find where the majority of your talk kind of focus on? Is it the results, or is it methodology? Is
That's
it
a
the intro?
great
Is it the
question.
background?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I spend a disproportionate amount of time in the introduction. I spend more than most of my colleagues in the introduction because I really want people to understand this stuff. And maybe that's not the best. I don't know. I mean, so much of what I guess because I am almost always sort of advocating for reductions in antibiotic use. So even if I'm talking about, if I want to talk about some really new, exciting research that we're doing on an emerging antibiotic-resistant pathogen, I still don't want to miss the opportunity to talk about like this crisis that we're in the midst of. And so I almost always take that opportunity to talk about the problem in the big picture, and I help people frame it out. That's totally the opposite of how like newspaper editing is done, right? Where you start with what did you find right off the bat, and then you add a little information, and maybe you talk about methods. And you guys will have to, for your CEs, talk about your methods a bit, which is the most boring part of all talks. But it doesn't. But I think you've probably seen some good talks here where it wasn't boring, right? And I spend a bit of time, if I'm talking about my genomic epi stuff, I talk about the methods a bit.
So what about if you're giving a scientific talk at a conference?
Yeah.
It's like a 12-minute talk.
A 12-minute talk, I still have a pretty good intro, and I still talk about this issue because I want my peers to be aware of it as well. But if I'm talking about, for instance, if I'm talking about the penis microbiome, which I do talk about sometimes, and the impacts of circumcision on HIV transmission, then the intro, I'm obviously not going to talk about antibiotic use in food animal production because people are going to be like, what? Pervert. So I'll talk about HIV and I'll frame it out, and I'll say, sometimes I think we forget about this ongoing epidemic, you know, and I'll kind of frame that out. So I always want people to know, even if I'm only working on this one very kind of weird piece of the puzzle, I want people to know what the overall puzzle is.
Have you found, so I heard somewhere that, you know, you really have people's attention, their undivided attention for maybe the first 5, maybe 10 minutes. And then it kind of, you know, it tapers in and out. And then you know, lose people to phones or their hunger or what they're doing next. Like, I mean, have you found that, or have you thought about how to maximize like that time of undivided attention?
I think it's
Or listener fatigue, kind of.
yeah. I mean, I think I almost every talk I pull out every rabbit I have in that hat, right? So I mean, I'm pacing the stage, I'm altering the volume of my voice, and I'm, you know, probably breaking all the rules of Toastmasters, gesticulating too much, and I throw in a joke here and there, and I try to make my slides really good, and I generally hold people for the time, and I don't think that that's just like my special ability. I mean, I think I got it from practice, and I think that all of you guys can do that, and you're all working on important issues, and there's no reason why you should lose people in a 15-minute talk, let alone, I mean, well, sorry, it's a little more challenging in a 45-minute talk, but I think if you're empathetic to your audience, sympathetic to your audience, you can hold them. You know, but that's an important point. So, you know, with papers, you always start with an abstract too, and so maybe you want to say in your right off the bat, I'm going to tell you how we discovered X, and you know, like the newspaper article, and you just tell them right up front, and maybe that'll hold people a little more. They want to know how you got there. I think listening to other storytellers is important. So This American Life and those kinds of shows where you have people telling stories and thinking about what holds you in a story, like what holds your attention, and incorporate as much of that as you can into your talks. And you may think that that doesn't make any sense, but I think you do have to flow it that way.
I heart Iron Well, I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
Other questions or thoughts? Thank you. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Just gave away all my secrets, man.